Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm great. How do you like this beautiful reservoir in Massachusetts?
I think it's fascinating. Look at the mosaic of colors with the deciduous trees and the evergreen trees there. It's lovely.
It is. It is. I wish I had the eye for this kind of photography
Oh, yes.
that clearly other people do. So this is the first of our weekly briefings, Deirdre.
Yes.
And this is meant for those of the folks who support what we do, who we deeply appreciate. And it's targeted at helping them make better decisions on a daily basis by providing them insight into what we see in the three areas of what might they be missing that we might have some insight into. What insights might we have about motivations that are happening around the topics that might affect them? And then also, what insights do we have about accomplishing
Right.
things? So, with that in mind, our plan is to take this for about 40 minutes and we'll stop after 40 minutes if we need that long.
Right.
Um, and we'll then be using topics that we see in the marketplace at this very moment that have relevance. So we're going to use a topic to launch into a discussion about these three things. What could we all be missing? What potentially could we be seeing in the motivations of those involved and those actors involved? And then lastly, the idea of accomplishing what might we be seeing in things that would either help or hurt in getting these things done
Right.
on a daily basis. And as I said, all of this is in service of being able to help the folks that we deal with be able to see things a little clearer, reduce the risk, and reduce the surprises they may incur in making the decisions they need to make on a daily basis. Okay. So with that, I'm going to throw the first topic over, and you've been talking about this for the last couple of days. Actually a little bit more than that, actually, since it was announced. And this is the issue about Amazon and their announcement about their workforce. So I'm going to let you take it from here and proceed.
Yes, absolutely. I've got a lot to say on this, so break in whenever you want. Um, Now, remember that we're thinking about these things in the context of helping leaders navigate the now. So here I am sitting at my desk, reading about Amazon wanting everyone back in the office full time. And of course, there's pushback from people. Um, and as someone who has multiple C-suite roles, as you have, Tom, has had to actually run businesses, have had to work through the assessing, the deciding, and accomplishing, and so forth. I'm reacting to this whole situation the way I think leaders are reacting to it. Well, on the other hand, you have workers. And I'm using the word workers because I think people who are reacting the way they are acting as workers. They're talking about they can be as productive. They're talking about how they want time off. They want to manage a lifestyle and so forth. Now, how do I, as a leader, react to this? I certainly want a workforce that is productive, but it's also productive and contributing to my company. And that's where I start to get the questions in mind.
How would you respond to a group of people that say, well, uh, we've always worked from home, meaning, our programming team, we started the business as a remote business, and that's the way it's been. And we have various communication tools we use for social interaction, and we, have our own way of working as a team, even though it's connected electronically. How would you react to that? And also, there's another aspect too. How do you react to the fact that perhaps there's not a desire to do anything but do the work they're doing?
Okay.
So how do you react to all of those kind of pushbacks that people might have in this? Because I think that's where Amazon, because you probably saw the data I saw, I think it was late last night, I saw that there's data that indicates over 70% of the people at Amazon say they don't want to go back to work in the office. That's a large percentage saying they don't want to go back. I'm not indicating whether that is what's not going to go back. I'm just saying they don't want to go back.
They
Right.
prefer not going back to be in the office 5 days a week. And I think that's the convenience factor. But let's deal with the 2 points you brought up. If the strategy of a business started, say, before the pandemic, had people, a particular team working at home, that's a slightly different situation because the Amazon situation evolved from the COVID. I'll give you an example. One of my nephews works for a completely virtual consulting company where they have consultants placed all over the country, working with clients all over the country. They have detailed online interactions with the home headquarters all the time. They have at least one call a day. They do reporting and so forth. All of this is built into the strategy of the organization. We're not talking about a company like Amazon, which had to go to some different structure outside of the strategy um, to accommodate a pandemic. And by the
So
way,
what you're doing here is you're reacting to the Amazon specific.
I'm reacting to the Amazon, but it goes a little farther. That in my nephew's consulting company, they built in the promotions, they built in the learning, they built in the interactions, they built in the culture. All of those things were set up with the strategy of establishing the company. So they've developed ways to do that. They're not trying to struggle and come around afterwards. There's also, by the way, and something that tends to be overlooked in the whole Amazon situation, and I'll mention it right now, and that's the whole fairness of it. What percentage of Amazon people can actually work from home a day or two a week? Most of the people are in warehouses and out driving trucks and so forth. In my nephew's consulting company, they're all virtual. So there's no issue of fairness there. But there are rules of interactions with people. If you need to contact an expert, here's how you do it. And the experts are expected to work with you. That's what they're there for, and so forth.
So
So it's
you
a
brought up
different
an
thing.
interesting point to me at one point about all this, and it's that if you then step away from the Amazon example, and so your point about the Amazon thing is that, look, they built their company a certain way. They were forced into a remote situation, and there was never. It's not, it's not clear that they completely retooled the company. Again, we could be missing something here, right? But it's not, we don't know. But it's also, we're seeing this with large banks in New York. We're seeing a lot of companies that are trying to revert back. And it's hard to know whether it's returning to the past, right? Which you and I both know is a mistake, right?
Yeah.
You don't ever try to go backwards. You've got to move forward. So it's hard to know in some of these cases whether it's just a return to the past or is there really a solid set of actions that will help improve both the productivity and effectiveness of the company,
And
right?
and I think it's the latter that I think it's my sense that a lot of the people who want to work at home, yes, it's fun to be able to run out into a park or walk the dog in the morning and so forth. But they're thinking in terms of their careers as this. They're thinking in terms of, say, a gig economy way of operating. They're not thinking in terms of building careers, which, by the way, limits their usefulness to any company, as you and I know. Companies benefit more when people are ambitious, when they want to grow and learn and so forth. That the people who just want to do tasks like these coders, like, oh, I can be as productive coding from home, could be doing their coding for anyone. There's no sense of interaction with the company per se. And by the way, with all of the layoffs of coders in all of the tech companies, they're not safe in terms of employment. But there's
Well, I
so,
mean, we're seeing that right now, right?
oh,
So,
absolutely.
so one of the things you mentioned to me, Deirdre, about this is that you think there's a larger picture here that we're if we're really trying to look at, okay, what is the role of if we're looking at the I mean, excuse me, the accomplished side of our triad, right?
Right.
Getting the work done. One of the things you've mentioned to me, and you mentioned again this morning, is that you're concerned about what are our future leaders seeing in terms of a model of leadership. And you're worried that the lack of this constant personal interaction uh, is perhaps, and then how are, I'm not even saying what you said to me very well, so I'm going to let you say it instead of me saying, you
Okay.
know where I'm heading on
Yeah,
this. It's models
yeah.
of leadership, right?
Yeah, I'll say that well, this is this is an extension of what I was saying earlier about the culture, that you're not doing the transfers of knowledge, you're not doing the building of the culture and so forth. And part of that is how people actually operate as managers and leaders and so forth. What do good managers and leaders actually do?
Yeah.
That unless you're in contact with your managers and leaders directly, you're not learning how to operate.
So
At
how are they learning?
How are they learn?
How are they learning?
Well, they're
This
learning
is your
by
problem,
observing.
right?
This was the key point that I think I was making. They're learning by observing what they're picking up from sitting at home. And my fear is that too many younger people, particularly, are learning about what they see as leadership, and that's definitely in quotation marks, by watching politics, which is a disaster right now in terms of effective leadership, where you have contention as the driving force in politics. You don't have the effectiveness of running a company or running a country even, or building initiatives or solving problems and these sorts of things. So that if your only model of leadership is what you're seeing on television, then you're not going to learn how to function as a good leader yourself. You're not
Yes,
going to
and
learn.
when you say television, you mean streaming, and because they're not getting it from the TV device, right? Even mine stays dark. It's really my
Yeah,
screen, the light brings back.
exactly. When what you're taking in, however you do it, is this deeply broken political model of leadership, and you have no counterbalance in a good workplace, then you're not learning how to become a good leader yourself.
Yeah.
You're,
And
and I think that's why a lot of people, by the way, think they can work from home. It's because they have no sense of how a good organization operates and what they're missing by
yes,
not
and
showing
and
up.
when you say this, you and I think globally. So we don't think about what our governor is doing or what our mayor is doing, even though that's critically important. And you used an example of the mayor of Asheville earlier with me this morning,
Right.
um, but we're looking at global leaders. We're looking at what's going on in the Middle East. We're looking at what's going on in Europe and the EU. We're looking at what's going on in the UN, right?
Right,
So we're looking at these global and saying it doesn't matter where you are.
right.
We don't see a lot of outstanding leadership going on in the public sector globally. Um,
Absolutely true.
and so I think the essence of this for you, if we were going to say, if we're going to sum this up and move on to our next topic, um, is headed into where we were going next, and it's about that you're concerned that, and I think there's a good question is is are we building our leaders? Are we creating our leaders with good models, good role models? And if they're not seeing it in the workplace, where are they getting their models?
Right.
And unless they're students of the subject like you and I are, right, they might be getting very flawed models of what a good leader is and what good leadership is and what good even human interaction is. I mean, you and I are appalled at human interaction in general these
Yeah,
days. And it's just civility. It's just being good to people first, right? And
correct.
so I think that you're right. I think one of the things that is when you're doing, and you know, I think the lesson to be learned here that you were trying to get across to me this morning is Amazon is a great example of is when they're doing this, are they doing this? Let's hope that they're re-engineering this model to give them a more effective organization. It may still be productive, right? May actually lose a little bit of productivity, but it may be more effective. And this is the issue of why are you doing it? This is a motivational issue. Why are you doing it? And if you're doing it for those reasons, are you making sure that you're also building in the execution ability of that, right? So anybody that's thinking about doing this, that would be the real question in your mind. Are you committed to do it for good motivational reason? And then have you built in the necessary things to make it really work and serve your purpose?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that leads us to our next one, which is about decision making and this follows naturally from the topic that you just had, and this is specifically focused on what are you missing and what are the motivations. One of the things that we're seeing is that and we're dealing with this in the series we have going on now, the Navigating the Now, and it's where we're talking about these three ways of looking at decision making
Right.
with quick frameworks to be able to deal with, because what we're seeing is the field of decision making for all of us is just it's becoming incredibly rapid, and that we're having to make decisions about things that we used to have a lot more time to analyze and a lot more time to think about, and we're being called upon to make them much quicker.
Right.
And in a process, we all know how to make those decisions well when we have plenty of time, right? Because we've all been trained to do it and we've got experience doing it. And if we haven't, we can learn it.
Right.
The problem is that we're seeing and that I see along with you is that we're being called upon to make these decisions very rapidly, or to live with decisions we didn't even want to have happen. And
Right.
how do we now deal with it? Because we can't just let it sit. And unfortunately, the disruptions that we're seeing globally, and I'm talking about not only our our national situation, but it could be anywhere, right? It could be Greece, it could be um, France, I mean, or the UK. Pick your country around the
Right.
world. I just focused on Europe at the moment. But nationally, there's a feeling of uncertainty. And then you've got the geopolitical. How does that affect everybody, right? Because just because you function that way, that also affects others. And then the economic effect. I mean, and so what's happening is our contention is what happens is you wake up, and things are different when you wake up than they were when you went to sleep. And now, because of the interconnectedness of us all, they matter in a different way,
Yes.
right? So they matter about what you actually should potentially do that day, or a decision you should make, or how that might change what you do tomorrow,
Right.
as opposed to some strategic gap you see that you'd like to close. So that what we're doing is how do we help people in that environment? Is how do you get a sense of this? And so we're seeing the speed, we're seeing the disruptions can be massive, right? We're seeing here in the United States just the political situation in the United States and the pushing back and forth. But then you have things happen like a hurricane comes through and just disrupts and damages in incredibly personal ways and in tragic ways people's homes in
Yes.
multiple states. And then you have on top of that, you have a very edgy political fight going on to who's going to win control of the country over the next few years. And then on top of that, you've got all these geopolitical things that are hitting us, like the sides we're supporting or not supporting in the Middle East, or in um, the conflicts that go beyond there. where it's heightened. And those are just, we can pick your hotspot, Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, Taiwan and China. Pick your hotspot. We could keep going, Korea, North Korea, and around the world. And we aren't dealing with even the terribly tragic things that are going on in other countries. So the fact that these now hit us in a different way, right? They hit us because we may have taken supplies from the 82nd Airborne and sent them overseas to be part of staging to make sure we had supplies ready. And now we don't have them just for a few miles down the road to be able to help with the floods they're having in their own state. So it makes the situation really difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And it affects how we make decisions. And
Yes.
I'm going to let you take
And
it.
yeah, let's get to business in this whole thing, and let's talk about the port strike.
Okay.
Um, you know,
I didn't even get to that one yet.
like all of the ports along the East Coast, from Maine down to Texas, are on strike. And they're on strike for things that, to my ear, sound extraordinary. I can't see the various entities running these ports actually giving into this. They're asking for significant financial raises so that each stevedore is going to be making well over $200,000 a year as base salary. What was it, $69 an hour, which is a fair bit above minimum wage. But even more so, what they're asking for is a guarantee that the ports will not be automated, that no stevedores will lose their job to robots and pallets and things like this. And to someone who operates in the tech field, who's been working in the tech, this is such an extraordinary demand that I just cannot believe that the various authorities will give into it. But then what you have going on here is no one at the federal government level, although they could intervene to keep the supplies moving, they're not going to do so. They've said they're not going to do so. They're in sympathy with the strikers. So what do you do from a business point of view? Supply chain disruption. Um, and both ways. We tend to think of supply chain as supplies coming in. We forget that it's supplies going out, i.e., our products going out. So it disrupts our whole financial model there. And how do you even begin to understand when you'll have resources? How can you assess the situation? How can you proceed with a strategy? You can't accomplish anything by and large, and you certainly can't eat bananas for breakfast. And
Well, yeah. So here's the thing that I think is important for people to think about.
yes,
It is that these kinds of disruptions that occur in a situation, they affect everybody. They
yes,
affect your workforce. They affect your customers' workforce.
yes,
That may affect your success in implementing something for a
correct,
customer, right? That may affect the
absolutely,
timeline of closing a deal. That may affect, so these kind of things, when they occur, the question that's important to ask is always, how does that affect me? And the thing that sometimes we all lose is we think about it affecting ourselves. Okay, so what does that mean to me? What does that
right,
mean to my suppliers of my
right,
business? Okay, we're not in fruits and vegetables, but what does it mean about the workforce?
yes,
Like I said, how does that change the the ability of our people to do their work or our customers to do their work?
correct,
Because that's what's going to directly affect us,
yeah,
beyond just the supply of that specific good and service. So if I were thinking about this right now, it's all right. So what am I missing about this situation? Well, one is that it's political people talking about doing this. Why are they doing this? What's the motivation involved of the
right,
players? And is it likely that one of them will try to step in and solve the problem and be the hero? And right, I mean, so you have no idea, and you have no way of knowing. So that's got to stay one of those things that it is something you cannot affect,
Right.
right? So then you have to protect your downside. You have
Yeah.
to protect that this will sustain, this
Yes.
will affect potentially. And if it goes on fairly long, what is the effect of that on, as I said, on me and my customers,
Yeah.
along with the suppliers on both sides, right?
And the obvious thing is prices. You know, when there are scarcities, prices go up. And right now, yes, inflation is starting to come down, but it could equally go up again fairly quickly.
Absolutely. This could easily change that whole pattern.
Change the whole pattern. And even though inflation's coming down, the grocery store prices are still high. All prices, all expenditures I make on things like energy, on utilities, on supplies for my car, on books, and every price of everything is staying at the high level. And now on top of that, prices are going to rise to cover things affected by the port strike, the limitation of supplies. But then what does that do? One, politically, with the perception of what's going on with the economy, but two, the ability of businesses to run their business. It may
Yeah,
be
so
that you can't afford to do
let's
things.
go through the other thing that troubles me about these situations and what we're seeing is institutions,
Yes,
the reactions of institutions, Deirdre. And you and I have talked about this. We went through this fairly lengthily over the last um, two sessions we held for the
right,
Navigating the Now series. But this is where our institutions appear to not be acting the way we have expected them to act, and they have acted in the past.
right,
And now, what does that mean? We're not seeing the government intercede, for
right,
example, on in the union thing when it appears, again, we could be missing a lot here, but it appears that at least, and from what we understand, they've been negotiating this for a fairly long period of time, and it's just really to some of us, it's only risen in the last month or so into our radar screen, which again is shame on us because this is a serious issue.
yes,
But regardless, our institutions are not doing what we would expect, right? I mean, at
right,
one point, you recall, uh, those of you that are students of history, Ronald Reagan took a very hard position with what appeared to be, again, a union stance that affected transportation. It was air traffic controllers, and
right,
he actually just told them to stay home
right,
and basically fired them,
right,
and recovered. I'm not suggesting, by the way, we're not taking sides in all these things. We're just trying to make sure we explore them. So we put them in your head to let
right,
you think about them and the effect they have on you. But it
right,
doesn't appear that we're going to be headed down a path like that at all. So we're going to be living with something going on here. And it appears that there's a great distance in what's being demanded and what's being offered on this. So this is going to be a lingering issue for us. And again, we're not seeing our institutions step in the way we've expected. I mean, we even saw that it wasn't even on a top priority of one of our cabinet secretaries that would normally have oversight on this. And she actually made it clear that she's not focused on it until recently.
right. And along the same lines, Tom, there was an analysis in the press about the laws governing the operations of ports, which date back to the 1920s.
Mhm.
They're 100 years old. And then some acts like the Jones Act, which forbid goods being shipped between two US cities to be done on other carriers, just exacerbate the whole problem. And this is another aspect of the institutions not
Not
keeping
keeping
up
up. Yeah.
with their basic responsibilities of operating what's under their control.
So then what happens is sort of what we're seeing in North Carolina, what we're seeing in other countries around the world, and what I expect we're going to see here, which I hope we don't, but a natural reaction is when the public starts acting on their own. And
Yes,
this is what we're seeing in North Carolina,
correct.
when for whatever reason, it appears from what we're seeing, again, we don't know, but it appears that we're not being as responsive as the folks there need. right? Now they're
Correct.
going to always need more than anybody could ever do.
Right.
But it appears, we're a week from when this was headed into that area, and it's still not very well covered. Now, there's a lot of reasons why, and we all understand that. So we're not trying to make a judgment there. But what it does say is the institutions, for whatever reason, they're not responding the way we would expect. And
Correct.
that the public will start to take up their own side of this.
Yes.
And it's hard to know, what we're seeing in the port strike is, well, the truckers union has now said, well, guess what? We're going to intercede our own way here. And this is when things become a little bit dicey,
Yes.
when our institutions are there to try to help make it work, right? And
Right.
we don't anticipate that there's going to be a lot of things to help us with the institutions. And so I think we have to expect that we are going to see even further disruptions as people, and we're seeing this in North Carolina, where the people are going in there and trying to do the work themselves. And as you have said to me, that many times gets in the way of the people professionally trying to do the work. And so good works can many times be 80% good work, but 20% not so good work.
Yeah.
But this is what I think we have to have put in our own minds
Right.
is in the lesson on this one, just like the lesson a minute ago on the Amazon one, the lesson on this one about decision making is that our decision making, again, we're not going to have the ability to continue to rely on things to maintain their stability and people interceding in a major way to make the stability happen.
And I'm going to introduce now at the very end of this recording a word that we're going to keep coming back to that we've been talking about, and we'll keep coming back to, and that's risk. We haven't yet talked about the risks all over the place on this. For Amazon itself, for the workers who want to stay at home, for the stevedores who are striking, for the ports operating, for the Teamsters who, given the example of the Baltimore port, when the Teamsters came in and saved the situation, they're prepared to save the situation now to their own benefit, to the poor people in Tennessee and North Carolina who are trying to decide whether even to rebuild towns that have been
Yeah.
completely
We
destroyed.
haven't even mentioned Georgia and Florida, and there's equal damage there too.
Right.
So no, you're right. It's that the basic idea here is the risk profile is going up. And what we're trying to do with this is just explore a few items
Right.
to start you thinking, because many times it isn't this specific subject that may cause you to be able to cover a risk or think about something, but it's the idea that you spend a moment talking about this. So we're going to stop here, Deirdre, so that people have a reasonable podcast they can
Okay.
manage with a hike on the
Okay.
weekend or running on the treadmill if they choose. But this is the purpose of this, is to get you thinking about a couple of subjects you may not have gone as deeply on, to open your thinking so that it opens your mind, because frequently when you do that, it usually causes something else to enlighten what you're doing. And that's what we're doing here, is to help you be able to answer those three questions. What am I missing about what I'm looking at? How are the motivations of those playing out, those actors involved playing out? And then, is time my friend or my enemy here?
Right.
And I think what we're saying about all of this is today, time is kind of our enemy. It's going to be with us, making
Time,
this hard for a while.
definitely the enemy. Yes.
It is making it hard for a while. It's great to talk to you.
And with you, Tom.
Pleasure as usual.